The Notre Dame men's and women's basketball programs are facing a make-or-break offseason. Key players are entering the transfer portal, coaching questions are mounting, and the future is in question. Basketball beat writer Tom Noie joins me to break down what went wrong and what needs to change for both teams on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I am thrilled to have you here with me on Wednesday, April 2nd. And thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. If you are new to this program, please take a second to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And we have lots of hoops coverage coming your way on today's show because I believe it is time to have a critical conversation about the state of Notre Dame basketball for the men's and the women's programs. Joining me is longtime Notre Dame basketball beat writer Tom Noie, who has covered both programs for years and has incredible insight into where things stand. We're going to dive into why this season didn't go as planned for either program, the impact of Tay Davis and Konieczny entering the transfer portal, and whether Markus Burton will be the centerpiece of the men's team moving forward. Plus, on the women's side, Olivia Miles' shocking decision to enter the transfer portal has left many wondering what's next for Coach Ivey's program. There's a lot to get into, so let's bring in Tom. Excited to have Tom Noie from the South Bend Tribune back on the show to talk some hoops. And Tom, a lot has happened since the last time you and I had the chance to catch up. And unfortunately, most of it has not been great for the Notre Dame men's or women's basketball programs. Let's start with Micah Shrewsberry's squad. Looking back at the season, what were the biggest reasons why this team didn't develop the way many of us had hoped?
Do we have like 17 hours to go through it all? Seriously.
I knew that was a big, super open-ended question, but we can focus on the biggest reasons why.
I think you have to start with Markus Burton's injury. When he went down, it kind of changed the entire dynamic of the season. It changed the entire dynamic of the team because in an ideal world, if Markus Burton goes down, hey, we've got this freshman point guard who was a top 50 recruit from Charlotte that they were so high on in Sir Muhammad. And every indication I got before Sir Muhammad even got here was Sir Muhammad's going to be the guy. Sir Muhammad's going to be the guy. And he could have been the guy when Markus Burton got hurt, except for the fact that Sir Muhammad was already hurt. And he was hurt from basically literally the first day that he stepped on campus or the first workout that he stepped on campus. He tweaked his knee and was kind of like, yeah, that doesn't feel good. And the one guy that we all wanted to see in that July workout was Sir Muhammad, and he's sitting on the sideline doing ball handling drills. So then we're like, uh-oh, we don't know where this thing is going. So when Burton goes down, you lose Markus Burton. You don't have Sir Muhammad. Those are your only two main ball handlers. And that basically throws everything that Micah Shrewsberry wanted to do right out the window. And it was grab bag. Like, he gets hurt against Rutgers. That's not good because it's not like you're not playing for another 4 days. You've got basically less than 24 hours and you're facing Houston, which last time I checked, they're in the Final Four as the number 1 seed. So it was just basically a scramble ever since then. They did find some footing with Tay Davis, with Matalaco. But then as Tay Davis is doing this, then he just kind of levels off. And then Matalaco gets hurt. And then Markus Burton comes back, and Kebajai doesn't develop maybe the way they thought that he would in the post. Nikita Konstantinovsky didn't come on until the very end of the season. So it was just a collection of one thing after another. And then, oh, by the way, the one thing you thought this team was ready to do, win close games, they couldn't close out close games. So it was just a collection of just everything that could have gone wrong for this men's basketball team this season went wrong. And they did not have the firepower, the experience, the coaching, the leadership to kind of right the ship and say, this stuff stops here and we're going to be a better team moving forward.
I've been thinking about that Houston game a lot lately because the Cougars are in the Final Four and they looked so good against Tennessee. And I was like, Notre Dame held their own against them. Now, granted, that game was back in late November, but I'm pretty sure it was either tied in the second half or Notre Dame was only down 1. I mean, Houston ended up winning that game by 11, but if those two teams played at the end of the season, I imagine the result would have been much different in favor of Houston. They would have won by a lot more. So Micah Shrewsberry made a point to focus on the offense over the offseason, and to his own admission, I should say, he essentially ignored the defense. Well, the defense got significantly worse, and the offense looked about the same, if not worse, than last year. So this team needs an identity, clearly, under Shrewsberry. Did you see any improvement in this team's search to find one as the season went on, or is that something that never really took shape and they're going to have to try to figure out again next year?
It would be okay to focus on the offense if you had a plan on what do you do well offensively. Like we've talked about it before. We've talked about it during the season where Micah Shrewsberry has the reputation of more plays than Broadway. Well, when the hell were we going to see some of those plays? Like we saw bits and pieces. Hey, that was a good out of bounds under, or that was a good after timeout. But I don't know how many times after a timeout or a late shot clock possession after a timeout where this team just didn't do anything. And we looked at each other on press row and we're like, what's going on? Like, what are they do? Like, what are they trying to run? What do they do well offensively other than set a ball screen for Markus Burton or let Tay Davis have a straight line drive to the rim or get an open three from Braden Shrewsberry? Like, I still don't know. And I still don't think they know what their identity is on offense. And when the identity went on offense, then it starts to be a head game where you're not playing defense, you're not boxing out, you're not guarding your guy because you're too worried about what's going on or what's not going on the other end. So it was just one big mess after another to where Micah Shrewsberry finally said, like he thought this season was going to be so much better offensively, which is why they focused on offense. They're like, we've got skilled guys, the athleticism level is better. The experience level is better. They're older. They've played together. We went on this foreign tour. They're going to be better offensively. And it turns out they weren't. And when they weren't, then you had nothing to hang your hat on because he had flushed the defense completely, which would have been okay if you're a team that was going to score 80, 85 points a game. But when you had trouble scoring and then you had trouble stopping the team from scoring, it was going to be a really bad season.
There were just way too many times when Markus Burton was dribbling at the top and there was just no movement. Everyone just kind of staring at him like, all right, man, you got this. But Shrewsberry was also vocal about fan support, to say the least, and the challenges of rebuilding at a place like Notre Dame. Just a little bit, one noteworthy press conference. But from your perspective, how much of not just this season, but the struggles for the men's basketball program can you attribute to talent, coaching, or other factors as Notre Dame tries to navigate this era of NIL and transfer portal, where we already know where most of the NIL money that goes to Notre Dame is going, the football program, and also like you just can't have undergraduate transfers come in and out the door at a place like Notre Dame?
It's always going to be difficult here, Tyler. You know that you're not going to get the 5-star guys. You're not going to get the one and done guys. You're not going to get the NBA potential guys. But that doesn't mean that you can't win here. The previous coaching staff, and I'm not going to sit here and turn this into a Mike Bray did this so Micah Shrewsberry could do that, but the previous coaching staff understood completely what the limitations were, what the guidelines were, what the regulations were, what the requirements were to not only win at Notre Dame, but to not only compete at Notre Dame, but to win at Notre Dame. And they did that in the Big East. And then they did it in the ACC. Like there are, I'm convinced. Yeah, this whole world has changed for college athletics, and there's NIL, and everybody wants their bag, and that's why Tay Davis isn't here because he thinks he's $1 million player. But we'll get into that later. Everybody wants their money, but at the end of the day, I still believe in 2025, just as it was in 2010 or 2013 or 2011, where Notre Dame can look at what the landscape is and say, we're not going to get these top guys, but that's okay because we're going to go out, we're going to find ourselves a Bonzie Colson. We're going to go out and find ourselves a Matt Farrell or a Martin Gebbin, or hey, how about this two-sport guy from Boston that nobody's looking at, and we're going to go sign a Pat Connaughton. There are guys still out there in college basketball or in high school basketball that dream of playing for Notre Dame. What this staff needs to do is understand what the limitations are and what box they're working in, and go find one of those guys this year or two of those guys next year and two of those guys the following year to where they're building something. I don't know, when we talked a lot about identity, I don't know if the staff knows what its recruiting identity is in relation to, in the same breath that we say we don't know what this team's offensive identity is. I think recruiting wise, Micah Shrewsberry came in the door full of bluster and full of confidence as to, I'm going to get this guy and this guy. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to recruit Indiana. I'm going to cover Indiana. Wait a minute. What are the academic requirements for Notre Dame? And I think that set him back the first year. It might have set him back a little bit the second year. If it continues to set him back, that will be the ultimate downfall of Micah Shrewsberry at Notre Dame, where he never embraced what the requirements and what the ramifications and what the guidelines were to get the type of Notre Dame student athlete here to play college basketball.
It's interesting you say that, because Notre Dame just signed one of their best recruiting classes in years. It's not just Jalen Harrelson. They also got Ryder Frost, Brady Kohler. Like, there's some really good players. Now, not saying you're going to build a tournament contender with a bunch of freshmen, but he actually got some guys in the door that were high school recruits. But as we've seen in college basketball, like, you got to get old. You got to get some guys in the transfer portal to come in. And you look at what Notre Dame had last year, like, I think we all had high hopes for Matt Alacco, and there were moments he was dealing with injuries throughout the year, but he also wasn't as aggressive as I thought he should be at times. I thought he was a little bit too passive, didn't shoot as much as you'd want, because he's actually a really good shooter. But now Micah Shrewsberry needs to get some guys in the transfer portal. So I know that you don't have any specific targets in mind, but what do you think are the biggest needs for this team as they look ahead to next year?
You need an experienced big. Like, you've done 2 years with Keba Jai. You gave Keba all the chances in the world to develop as a legit ACC big man. That's not working, and that's okay. If he can be a serviceable guy, either as a situational starter, what I mean by that is maybe 10 minutes a game here, and then the other guy comes in and he's doing this and he's doing that. That's okay for Keba. We've seen his limitations. They need to do more up front. And then also maybe a point guard, because you still don't know what Markus Burton's going to do. Now, as we sit here, it's April 1st. I do not expect Markus Burton to go to the transfer portal, but what I do expect Markus Burton to do is to declare again for the NBA draft. You can do it twice without having to lose your eligibility. So I expect Markus Burton to declare for the NBA draft this year to try and get into Chicago, which he was not able to do last year. He declared for the draft, and all the NBA scouts were kind of like, who? Like, we seriously. And talking with all the NBA scouts that rolled through Purcell Pavilion last year, none of them came to see Markus Burton. They were there to see Duke, or they were to see this guy or that guy. A guy from Ryan Dunn from Virginia. Nobody came to see Markus Burton. So when it came time for him to say, I'm going to declare and I hope to get into Chicago, the NBA scouts were like, just go back to school right now. So let's say he does get to Chicago this year, which would be a step for him to get there and to either interview or just knock the socks off of somebody if he's able to play 5-on-5. And hypothetically, let's say he gets to Chicago, he plays really well, he interviews even better, and a team like Oklahoma City, which has 700 picks in the June draft, says, we love you, we've got five first-round picks. We guarantee you right now, with the 28th pick or the 27th pick, we're going to take you. Then there's another situation that Micah Shrewsberry is going to have to address with his roster. But I don't expect that to happen. I expect him to go to Chicago to get the feedback and to come back to school for at least one more year. But until that happens, you need a big, and you may or may not need a guard. But eventually, you've got so many guys coming, whether it's the recruiting class that we talked about, whether it's 3 freshmen from this year. Like, eventually, some of those guys have to hit, and they have to hit big for this program to take that next small step next season.
Tom is going to be right back here with us in a moment to share more insight into Markus Burton's future with the program. But first, a word from Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. So let's say he gets the feedback from the NBA, decides that he doesn't like where he's probably going to get drafted, ends up coming back to Notre Dame. This is pretty blunt, but why? Why would he do that?
Because he'll get more NIL money. And at the end of the day, if you're making a nice amount of money from Notre Dame and you're a hometown kid and you have a chance to make more money than you ever dreamed about making in your life these next 2 years, and to chase the all-time scoring record at your hometown school for a guy who is like maybe a MAC player coming out of high school, at the end of the day, that's a pretty good gig, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I really hope Markus Burton comes back. I think just with the way things went this year, like that's a guy who should be playing in March. And I think he could be, like an NCAA tournament darling if he ever gets the opportunity. And Notre Dame just seems so far away from that right now that I sort of expected him to transfer, because I think like he has a better chance of transferring to a big-time program and then competing in March as opposed to getting drafted very high in the upcoming draft because of his size and some of his limitations there. But fingers crossed he ends up sticking around at Notre Dame. Can't say the same for Tay Davis. He entered the transfer portal after finishing second on the team in scoring this year. How big of a loss is he, and was this something that you saw coming?
I don't know if we saw Kerry Booth coming from a mile away last year. I don't know.
He's back in the portal, by the way.
Who was back in the portal, who said he wasn't back in the portal, but is back in the portal. But again, I just love anytime something like this happens, whether it's Kerry Booth or whoever, and had any sort of connection to Notre Dame, all the Notre Dame fans are like, maybe he'll come back to Notre Dame. Maybe he'll give it that. No, just move on from the Kerry Booths or now the Xavier Booker, or there any mention of a guy who's in a portal who had interest in Notre Dame. Fans all of a sudden they just want to connect the dots. It's not like a guy's at school A, B, or C, and his first thought is, I'm going to go to Notre Dame. Like it doesn't work that way. Now with Tay Davis, I think Tay Davis, his brother Dre, transferred from Seton Hall to Ole Miss and got a hell of a lot of money to go to Ole Miss last year. And I think, knowing what I know about Tay Davis, what I know about Tay Davis's family, I think they're looking for the biggest paycheck. And I have heard low 7 figures by an SEC school for Tay Davis, which is nowhere near what he was going to make here. And again, if that's a player's only motivation, Notre Dame's got no shot. Like, and Micah Shrewsberry said on the podium after they lost, this is after the loss. I was going to say, it's been so long and I've been so engrossed in what Notre Dame women's basketball is doing. I couldn't remember for a second who Notre Dame lost to in the second round of the ACC tournament.
North Carolina.
It took me a minute. North Carolina, they lost by 20, 76-56. But after that North Carolina game, and Micah Shrewsberry was on the podium in Charlotte, and somebody asked him about roster management and this and that. And Micah Shrewsberry said, look, we've got to do it differently, and we've got to get guys who want to be here and want to get a degree and want this and want that. It's obvious Tay Davis does not want that. He wants something else. He looks at what his brother got. He hears what he may or may not get. And at the end of the day, that Notre Dame degree doesn't mean anything to him because he's chasing a paycheck. And the coaching staff, I get the feeling that when they hear about Tay Davis, they say, all right, the money that we had earmarked, NIL money that we had earmarked for Tay Davis, instead of giving that to Tay Davis, let's go get us a transfer big. So now you have an opportunity to spend a little bit more money on an experienced big man. Now it's time to deliver and get an experienced big man.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to criticize him for leaving if he's really getting offered 7 figures somewhere, because I don't think anyone projects Tay Davis as like a future lottery pick or anything close to that. So if he's able to maximize his earnings playing college basketball, so be it. But on the topic of that Notre Dame North Carolina game, I guess you could say that Van Allen Lubin, we should pretty much eliminate all hopes of him coming back to Notre Dame, because I could believe the player that he's blossomed into.
As soon as he gets to the portal, it's like, oh, well, Van Allen Lubin was already here. Why would you go do something you've already tried and not enjoy to the point where you were in the portal? Like Van Allen Lubin, I'd say all those guys, out of those 3 guys in that class, JJ Starling, Dom Campbell, who's also back in the portal, and Van Allen Lubin, that entire freshman class that was here from Mike Bray's last season, Van Allen Lubin was the last to go into the portal and he went in only after Micah Shrewsberry was hired. So he had a chance to stay. And knowing who the head coach is going to be, and didn't stay. So cross Van Allen Lubin off the list, cross Kerry Booth off the list. You've got to just start fresh with a guy like the perfect example. And it's funny because he's back in the portal now. Perfect example of a guy, not necessarily him specifically, but somebody like that. Duncan Powell, who was at Georgia Tech, who they found. How does a guy wind up at Georgia Tech from freaking Sacramento State University? And he winds up at Georgia Tech, and he absolutely crushed Notre Dame in 2 games. Like I remember sitting in my hotel room in New Orleans on New Year's Eve, covering the Notre Dame Georgia Tech men's basketball game on television, and I'm like, "Who's this Duncan Powell guy?" He had like 24 points that day. It was a career high. They need to go and find a guy like that where nobody sees him coming, and then all of a sudden he's throwing together double-doubles in the ACC. That's the type of player Notre Dame needs out of the portal.
One other player that entered the portal from Notre Dame is J.R. Konieczny. I think this was the biggest lock ever, especially after one of his relatives started tweeting at you about his lack of playing time. And you and I have already talked about it this year, and the fact that he saw his minutes decrease a lot and just role was basically non-existent for this team at the end of the season. So I don't think anyone was surprised by that move, but so much of this comes down to talent acquisition. But beyond adding talent, what do you think Micah Shrewsberry needs to change, whether it's his own approach, player development, to get this program moving in the right direction?
If I was giving him advice, and why would he take advice from me? But
hey, you've been around.
This is the advice that I would say. I'll clean it up because I could throw a couple of words in there too. No, I won't clean it up.
Hey,
because
fire away.
This is what has concerned me for 2 years in watching Micah Shrewsberry. And there have been times where a season has gone completely sideways, where I'm only watching Micah Shrewsberry during a game. And the one thing I would say to Micah Shrewsberry about coaching moving forward would be sit your ass down during games. Like, I think he overcoaches. This is him during every possession. He's pointing, he's moving, he's talking, he's yelling, he's this, he's that. Like basketball to me, Tyler, I don't know about you. Basketball to me is an instinct game. Like you play the game based on what you know up here, not what you're hearing from the bench. And there was a time, I think, where I forget what game it was. Maybe I was watching that. I think I was watching that on TV, or maybe it was in person, where he was calling out Braden Shrewsberry to go set a screen, and Braden's getting ready to set the screen, and Mike is saying something to him. And as he's getting ready to set the screen, he's looking to the bench. Like how can you do anything that's productive when you're constantly looking at the bench? And I compare Micah Shrewsberry to former Boston College, former Ivy League coach, former everything coach, Steve Donahue, who was the same way, where he coached every single second of every single possession. He's constantly barking at guys. He's calling out sets. He's saying where the ball should go, where a player should go. I just don't know how you can play like that in basketball and play well. Like, that's what you do during the week over at Rolfs Hall from 3:30 to 5:30. You coach your ass off at Rolfs Hall. And then when it comes time for the game, you say, this is what the game plan, it's this, this, and this. Let's go execute it. And then you allow the players to breathe, to think, or not to think, and just go play. Like we talk about Tay Davis. Tay Davis is going to leave for the money, and rightfully so. But I think another reason Tay Davis is leaving is because he just got tired of Micah Shrewsberry constantly barking at him. Like, let me just go play. So, and I don't think Micah Shrewsberry is going to do that because he's not wired that way. But that would be my suggestion: is just let the players play. You coach during the week, and then let's see where it all goes. Because I think at some point it's paralysis by analysis, and they just get tired of hearing the head coach telling them what to do every single second they're on the floor.
That's what's so ironic by this team's lack of movement is you got Shrewsberry yelling the whole time, coaching so hard, and the guys are looking around like, where do we even go? But I totally agree with your point. It's like, Dan Hurley, for example, is a lunatic at UConn. He'll call the set before the play, and then he'll just sit there, with his jaw out and everything. And then once the play is over, then he'll explode on one of his players or the referees. But during the play, the guys know where they need to go, and they have as complex of an offense as literally anyone in the entire country. We'll be right back with Tom to break down what went wrong for the women's team down the stretch. But before we do, I want to tell you about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. I do have a few questions about the women's team before we go. What's your outlook for the future of the program under Niele Ivey? Because this team was so poised to make a deep run, but they faltered down the stretch, and it ultimately ended with a loss to TCU in the Sweet 16 for I believe the fourth year in a row.
Yep, I did a preseason talk with the Notre Dame Club of St. Joe Valley over at the X Center in October, and I said, if I am not in Tampa the first weekend in April, it's an abject failure of a season. And they did a lot. They won 28 games. They won 19 in a row. They won 85 days without a loss. They were ranked number 1. But to have that type of talent and not get to Tampa is an indictment on either the coaching, the roster development, the roster makeup, or a little of everything. And I think I'm going to go door number 4 and say everything. Like it was a little of this, it was a little of that. Like Sony Citron, who I'm going to miss unbelievably from a reporter player standpoint, because I called Sony Citron the ultimate truth teller. Like, other players would get up at the podium on a dais after a game and just kind of talk about, just spout the company line. If there was ever something that was wrong, Sony Citron wasn't afraid to say it. And after the game against CCU, she said, well, there was a time we had so much talent, and at times we had too much talent. And everybody ran with it, and they're like, what is that? Like, you can have talent, you can have a lot of talent, you can have too much talent. But I think at the end of the day, what set this team apart, why they're home now, is they didn't have the right talent. And it was a bad mix for various reasons. And that's why they're sitting at home instead of me getting ready to go to Tampa tomorrow.
What do you mean by the right talent? Just not spread out by position or like too many ball handlers?
Yeah, I mean, you've got two dynamic guards in Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles, and that's going to work, and it worked for a while, but it's only going to work to a certain point. And there were times in the postseason where it was bad body language, Notre Dame women's basketball.
It's horrible against TCU.
Well, TCU, okay, here it is against Duke in the ACC tournament. Olivia Miles has the ball at the top of the key, and Hannah Hidalgo cut through to try and get the ball, and she was waved off by Miles. So Hidalgo goes in front of the Notre Dame bench, stands in front of the Notre Dame bench in the corner with her arms down at her hands down at her side, as opposed like in a pose like, what am I doing here? And she just stood there. She didn't move. She didn't cut. She didn't try to set a screen. She just stood there and watched Miles. And I saw that possession, and I'm like, you know what? There's just something off about this. And when Niele Ivey needs an hour and 19 minutes to address her team after they lost at home to Florida State, and it takes more than an hour to address her team after the Duke game, both those games are at the end of the season. Like, it's February, it's March. Those aren't the times to be spending an hour in the locker room with your team. There's some bad juju going on there, if that's the case, to where you need more than an hour after a loss to talk to your team about what they did or didn't do.
So I take it you weren't surprised that Olivia Miles decided to enter the transfer portal?
No, because we talked to Olivia after the TCU game, and she's going back and forth, and she's weighing all the pros and cons. And as she's talking, I'm thinking, maybe she's going to go. And then
I thought she'd go to the WNBA draft. She's a top 5 projected pick.
Well, this is what raised the red flag on that, when she said, she was going to be a top 2 pick. She was a top 2 pick. It was Paige Beckers and it was Olivia Miles, 1-2, guaranteed. She was a top 2 pick. But in the same breath, she said, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready to jump right into a WNBA season. And you got to remember that it's kind of goofy because it goes right from the Final Four to the draft, to preseason camp, to preseason games, to the regular season. And before you know it, it's September 14th and the WNBA season's over. And you took one look, like I took one look at Olivia Miles' ankle after the Michigan game, because we walk in the locker room. She's in the locker room. She's got her left ankle up on a ledge in the locker room lounge. And I took one look at it and almost passed out and said, how the hell did you play on that? Because it was blue, it was black, it was red, it was purple, it was swollen. She's like, oh, this looked really good because yesterday there was a golf ball size lump like this big right here. And I said, how did you play 27 minutes on that? And then it wasn't that much better a week later in Birmingham. She said, well, right now it's about 65%. So I looked at her and I said, there is no way she's emotionally or physically ready to go and play a WNBA season right now. And the more she talked, the more I'm thinking she may stay in college, but she may not come back to Notre Dame. And I was on a conference call on our staff meeting yesterday, and I said the best thing that Olivia Miles can, because my supervisor said, I just love watching Olivia Miles play. And I said the best thing that Olivia Miles can do right now is stay in college one more year, but go play somewhere else other than Notre Dame. Have the ball, because she's as dynamic as Hannah Hidalgo. And you can play those two together, but at some point, Hannah's going to be like, I have to be Hannah. And Olivia's going to be like, I have to be Olivia Miles. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just can't play them together, and you just can't, you can't build up the way everything was built up this year to have the team that was going to make a run and get back to the Final Four for the first time since 2019. And for the 4th year in a row, you're going home in the Sweet 16.
I think when the news first came out, first of all, the fact that it came from Shams was pretty, maybe that's like the most surprising thing in all of it, because he's the biggest.
That's a major NBA flex right there.
Yeah, that's true. It's
like Olivia's represented by William Morris. So that's a high end agency. And you just kind of knew that. I asked her, I said, do you have a timetable? I asked her, this was Saturday afternoon in Birmingham. I said, do you have a timetable? And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, do you have any idea when this decision-making process will be done? And she's like, well, I haven't even thought about it. Obviously, looking back now, she did think about it. And she's like,
she gave a speech to the Notre Dame crowd after the second round game because she knew that was the last game.
Again, that was another indication. She knew, like, and when it was funny, that was the same day that I was in the locker room talking to her about her ankle. Somebody asked her about the speech post game, and she's like, if this is my last game. And I'm like, what do you mean if? She's like, well, I just kind of have to say that. So we knew that it was going to be her last game at Notre Dame. It turns out it wasn't going to be her last game in college.
Yeah, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me when Drew Pine went to Pete Thamel to announce that he was going to enter the transfer portal, though it's a little bit different in terms of, stature of the sport with Olivia Miles and Drew Pine. But there's a lot more news, I'm sure, that's going to break here in the next few weeks. Hopefully Notre Dame catches some breaks, men's and women's side, because it has been really just been nothing but bad news lately. So tell the people where they can find you before we let go.
I don't even know where to find me.
South Bend Tribune would be a good start.
South Bend Tribune would be a good, southbendtribune.com would be a good start. NDinsider.com would be a good start. But after, and like I told my guys, my sports department yesterday, March 31st was the first day that I have not been tied to the calendar covering Notre Dame football, Notre Dame men's basketball, or Notre Dame women's basketball since mid-July. So I'm kind of ready for a break. So like when you're asking me all these questions, and my brain is still trying to decompress on this run that I've been on through the college football playoff and through 2 college basketball seasons, to the point where I'm just like, wait, what day is it? What time is it?
Well, hey, I've appreciated your coverage all season long. You deserve a break. I hope you enjoy one after this, and we'll catch up again soon, maybe sometime later on in the summer as we start to get ready for the upcoming seasons.
You got it, brother.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we're going to have another guest on the show, our third guest of the week, actually. And this time, we're going to hear from a former Notre Dame football player to get his thoughts on the state of the football program. You're not going to want to miss it. And the best way to never miss an episode is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And remember, if you enjoyed the show today, give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review. I would really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.